Thank you very much. And thank you for having this and for being here and for being willing to work on these things and for the work that I know from Professor Montero that you guys do. This is a pretty remarkable group of people. Remarkable in terms of frequency across I'm an old guy and I've been around a lot of places, and this is very unique what happens here with the Saturday Free School and with the community work that's done among you people, and I'm very pleased to see it. It's encouraging, especially at my age, to see something happening someplace. And I hope to hell this catches fire somewhere and helps make some major changes that need to be done. Sunday is 100 years to the day since the armistice was implemented that put an end to the actual fighting of World War I. That preceded by a year or two, depending on which particular piece of paper was signed, the actual treaties that settled the business of the powers for the moment that got reopened again in the 1930s. The end of World War I really represents the end of the beginning of the greatest failure of the working class in the history of the class. And that was its failure to comprehend its international nature and its position relative to the ruling class in its own country in most places. In Russia, that's not what happened. In Germany, that's not what happened, although it never got fully expressed. In a number of other places, including in some of the colonies, that's not what happened. But across the planet, we are still living with the consequences of this failure. And you know, perhaps by several orders of magnitude in terms of misery, the number of people, the kinds of deprivation, the distance between the pinnacles of the society and the depths of the society across the planet. And also, given the means of communication that we have, the general ignorance of our class about itself and its condition and how it relates to power and our future. And that is essentially the work that is before us if we're going to survive as a species, and there are an awful lot of other species on this planet who are tethered to our fate just by our own actions. You know, there's a lot of work on that score to do. What I would like to do with the time that I have here, because of this group, is to try, I hear a lot of people lecture on political theory, and again, I'm 64 years old. I've been interested in this stuff since I was in my early teens, so I've seen 50 years of it at least, in some considerable depth. I've been alive for 64 of the last 100 years since the armistice was signed, and seen, you know, this whole thing happen in front of me, powerless, like the rest of us. I don't see anyone working on a solution now that seriously looks like it has some chance of success. The left parties that exist in the United States, and they're my friends, and PSL and Workers' World, and you know, whatever other, the RCP even, I have friends there too. That is not where our salvation is going to lie. We're going to have to do it ourselves. And what we have to do first, Professor Montero spoke before about, you know, the necessity to develop and, you know, to sharpen ideology, the necessity of struggle at an ideological level, of developing an ideology that is up to the task of doing the work that has to be done. That has to be developed first. We don't have it. It's there in the books. We can read DuBois, we can read Lenin, we can read Marx, we can read 1,000 other people that have written different things over the years. But we really don't have that technology at our disposal, and we need to get it really goddamn fast. All of the other problems that face us, the things that everyone is willing to compromise at a community level. I heard a gentleman talking before about, you know, we struggled to make this happen in a community. Everybody put everything in place. Some guy walked in at the last minute and stole our stuff. And so we lobbied for this housing, and we got this housing, and somebody else moved into it. All these different things rest on these little compromises that are made at the grassroots level, this lesser evilism, this, look, this is gonna make it better for these 100 people here, so we can't think about those people right now. That whole thinking undermines our ability to do strategic planning, to deal with the most powerful class of dictators that has ever lived on the planet Earth, certainly, for all we know, in the whole universe. They may truly be exceptional, as they hold themselves out to be, among life forms, at least in this galaxy. There's no evidence to the contrary. And so, what I'd like to try to do is have a conversation where we think of things that can be done. Look, you see every time some political development happens now, Sessions gets fired or asked to leave the day before yesterday. There are hundreds of thousands of people mobilized. How is that possible? Most people never met Sessions. They don't know a gosh darn thing about him other than his name is Beauregard and he's named after Jefferson Davis. Suddenly they're marching for him. In the middle of this comes out, well, by the way, when Sessions left, the secondary market in cannabis stocks shot up. Instead of hearing somebody say, the what? Aren't there a few 100,000 people in prison still for selling nickel bags of pot? Yeah. And there's a secondary market in marijuana stocks? And instead I'm going to go march against Sessions? Right. Yeah. We have like all this foundational work that we have to do before we can do the big stuff. And it's not trying to make it a little more comfortable for this one and selling that one out. It's not, the failure that we suffer from that took place was not recognizing that the working person in Africa and Latin America and Asia and in the other countries in Europe that we were fighting against were our brothers and sisters, and the enemy was the guy that was going to kill them and sending us to kill them. And so we were making compromises with everybody else, including our enemy, because it made our lives a little better, or we thought it would. And now, 100 years later, here we are. I'd like to try to start a conversation about how we look around where we are and start weaving some kind of a cloth that can help us build the thing we need to build. But I don't know how we're going to do that because I don't have any examples of it to model from, and I'm open to ideas. Thank you.